Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ann Heathman, a local author, and it's my pleasure today to introduce our speaker. He doesn't really need much of an introduction, and in fact, he's going to be telling you a lot about himself anyway, so I'm not going to overdo it. I met Mike approximately a little over a year ago. He was in the process of finishing his first book. If you haven't read it or seen it, you got to check it out. It's a middle grade book. My grandson, he's 10, he can read it. It's anywhere from 5th, 6th grade, about a girl and her dog. It's a great story, so check it out. But this was his first book, so I tried to offer him some tips because I had written books already, and so I thought, well, perhaps I can share some knowledge with him. So I got more than I bargained for. I got a wonderful friend. He's a great author and a person with a wealth of information. You're going to enjoy his talk today, I'm sure. So without stomping on any of his lines, it's my pleasure to introduce Mike Bowling.
Well, hello there. You know, sometimes I get nervous with extremely big crowds, so I'm not nervous today. But at any rate, how many of you in here know about her if it's not coming up loud enough? You want to be able to hear me. Here we go. Can you hear me now? Is that loud enough? Okay, I got to get my face up against this to talk to you. I'm kind of the one that likes to move around. But anyways, how many of you in here have ever heard of or know anything about Pound Puppies? Ah, I like that. Majority in here. Well, I'm living the American dream. I put my little friend up here. And believe it or not, this dog's from 1984. So it's young. See, the nice is they stay puppy the whole time in the process. And what? Okay. There we go. And that's my beautiful wife, Charlotte, over there, who puts up with me all the time and makes sure I stay in line. Okay, that's my sound crew right there in the process. I like to tell a little bit about my background first so you can get a better appreciation for the story that I'm getting ready to tell you. Okay, I was born in Hazard, Kentucky, back in a holler. When I was 5 years old, my family moved to Dayton, Ohio, because my dad didn't want to work in the coal mines, and he went to work in a foundry. And we ended up living in northern Ohio and then back down to southern Ohio, where my dad worked at Ford Motor Company. When I got out of high school, he got me a job in the factory, and that's what you did. College was really not a thought process, so I never went to college nor graduated from college. I worked at Ford in a factory for 16, 17 years, and in December of 1983, I got an idea for a toy. And I got the idea, it was December the 27th of 1983, 2 days after Christmas, because I had bought this little soft sculpture boy doll from a local craft store. Wasn't a Cabbage Patch, but you know what I mean, a handmade one. And she took it everywhere with her, and she fed it like it was her baby. And we were riding along in the car one day, and I was thinking, how can an inanimate object have that much emotional appeal with a child? And I thought, well, if there's two things people love in this world, it's their kids and their pets. And some people treat their pets as if they're their kids in the process, which I'm one of those. Okay, always had a dog since I was as early as I could remember in the process. And I thought, oh, okay. So, and when I was growing up and you didn't have a lot of money, where did you get a dog? The pound. That's back when that was what it was called. Now they call them shelters. But back in the olden days, they were called pounds. So I thought, oh, pound dogs. And I thought, some people don't like dogs, but everybody loves a puppy. When they come up to you with the whole body shaking and bending in the middle and everything else and the tail wagging. So I thought of Pound Puppies, and that was the seed of the idea. So I turned around and I took that idea and I started developing it, and there was one thing that I would not do. I would not quit. I don't care what. I said, this is it. This is my chance. I remember the moment that came to me, the aha, when I got the idea. And I started slamming my fist on the steering wheel of my car, and we were driving by a store called Kmart. You remember those, which are not around anymore. I never forget that moment. And I said, this is it. This is the idea. And I had had many, many ideas. Trust me, when you've got 17 years working in a factory, and 7 of those years on an assembly line, you got a lot of time to think. And I was always thinking of ideas. But as with most people, that little guy that sits on your shoulder that says, you can't do that, you don't have the money, you don't know what you're doing, you don't know anything about that industry, what are you thinking? And I constantly talked myself out of those ideas as I got them. With Pound Puppies, I was just at a different point in my life. And I'd been reading some positive mental attitude books and was really into that thought process. And I said, this is it, and I'm not going to quit. I kept working at it and developed the prototype. First thing I did, I went to an intellectual property attorney. Now, I'm making $10 an hour at Ford, and he was, I think, $125 an hour. And I went and sat down with him, and I said, I got this great idea. I'm going to invent these toys. They're going to be little stuffed dogs. I'm going to call them Pound Puppies. Kids will be able to adopt them. They'll be able to name them. And I always like to share this because it's very important. He stopped and he looked at me and he says, you can't own an idea. See. He says, you can own copyrights, trademarks, and patents, but you can't own an idea. Once you own it, then somebody has to pay you if they want to use it. So you've got to get your copyrights and trademarks for this thing. And to get a trademark at that time, you had to ship in interstate commerce. Now, I'm working in a factory at Ford, let alone shipping in interstate commerce. But I had to figure out how to make that happen. And I did by getting some handmade ones made of the Pound Puppies. And I was living in Ohio. I went over to Nashville, Indiana, a little community that had like the old downtown area. I walked down the street, found a store, a little mom and pop store, went in, little gift shop place, and I said, I had prototypes that I'd made. And I had them in a box like they were from the Pound, and I'd gotten through the process of getting the boxes made. And I said, I'm going to leave them with you, and you can sell them for whatever you want. Just send me half of whatever you sell them for. I got a check from Nashville, Indiana, from this shop. I went downtown, and I filed for my trademarks because I had shipped in interstate commerce. 4 dogs. That's all I needed to get sold to be able to apply. The reason I'm telling you that story is you go one step at a time and find the way, the next way, the next way. And I followed through on that. I developed the Pound Puppies at that time. I filed for the copyrights. I got the trademarks. And then the next step is I've got to go out and I've got to present it to toy companies in the process. I kept getting no's, and I got 14 no's before I got a yes on it. And one of the no's was a classic, which I'm so glad he rejected me this way, because it always gives me something to tell when I'm talking about this in the process. Everybody's really nice with you, and they go, oh, it's not what we're looking for. We're working on something different. It's not in our category. One excuse after the other, but I knew when I walked out of there, they were just, trying to get me out of the room without anything. I showed it to the president of Ideal. How many of you remember a toy company called Ideal? They're no longer around now, okay? And I went to New York City first time. I'm at the top of this building, glass, looking out on the city in a conference room, and I says, oh, I've arrived. I'm up here. The president of Ideal comes in, Lonnie Freiberger. He looks like a scene out of The Big. He had braces on, and his ears stuck out. And I said, he's a perfect toy company executive. I sat down, I made my presentation. He looked at him, he looked at me, and he says, that's the ugliest thing I've ever seen in my life. It looks like it's squatting to pee. And I've got a meeting to go to, and got up and walked out. I packed up my little puppies, and I went on and on and on until somebody finally said yes. And I like to share this little side story because I give thanks to God for the things that have happened to me in my life, and he's the reason that I'm successful. And many times he taps me on the top of the head. But I finally got Tonka. You remember Tonka, but Tonka just happened to be wanting to expand and become a full-line toy company. And so they wanted to get into other products, and they had a new CEO. Well, I went and presented it to them, told them what the terms were that I wanted, and they said they would get back to me. So 2 days later, I get a call, and it's the executive vice president of Tonka, Tony Miller. And Tony says, Mike, he said, we really want to do this. We've discussed it, but when we analyzed it, you're not really giving us that much. You're giving us a stuffed dog. There's been stuffed dogs before you. There'll be stuffed dogs after you. You're giving us a name, Pound Puppies. We come up with trademarks for toys every single day of the week. And you've got a box where they're in there, and the box has some writing and little things on it to make it look like they're from the pound. Well, we have a department, that's all they do all day long is design boxes. So he says, when you take it apart, you're really not offering us that much. We'd like to give you half of what you're asking for. Now, you got to understand, I've been turned down by 13 companies. So I'm scared, and I don't really want to turn this down. God tapped me on the head, and I said, Tony, I want to ask you a question. What's the cheapest part of an airplane? He goes, I don't know what you mean. I said, what's the cheapest part of an airplane? He says, I don't understand your question. I said, the wings. I said, all they are is some metal and struts, but I said, it sure won't fly without it, will it? And that's what I've given you guys, a jet in this toy, and that's what's going to make it successful. If you don't want it, I'll just move on. He said, oh, we want it. We'll pay what you want. He said, I drew the short straw to try and beat you up and get the cost down. So Tonka took the toy on, and actually in the spring of '84, we licensed it in Canada first. Irwin Toy took it in Canada in 1984, and we were the #1 new toy in Canada in 1984. I got to bring, when I keep saying we, I got to bring another name into this story for you. His name is Bob Steiner, God rest his soul. Bob, it's what I want to say about there's no such thing as luck from this standpoint. When I developed, you remember the original prototypes that I had that I took to Indiana and all that type of stuff, a local newspaper reporter heard about it. She came and did a little human interest story in a small hometown newspaper that said, factory worker invents toy called Pound Puppies. That was before they were anywhere. And she told her family doctor about this cute little toy, and he says, you know, he needs to call Bob Steiner. Bob Steiner's family started Kenner Toy Company. He used to work in the toy industry. They've sold it. He's in Washington, D.C., working for the Federal Trade Commission. But he'd be a good consultant for Mike. So gave the number. I called him up. I went to Washington, D.C. I was living in Cincinnati. I drove to Columbus, Ohio, because you could fly on People Express for $25 to Washington, D.C. Flew to Washington, D.C., met with him, showed him the concept. He said, I love it. I'll be a consultant. It's $150 an hour plus expenses. I said, I don't have any money. But I said, if you hang with me, I'll pay. I've never not paid a bill in my life. Just hang with me in the process. And so he, through his knowledge and all the years he was in the toy industry, he got me into the appointments. He knew the people to call to get me in to make the presentations. I still got 14 no's. Didn't matter, you know, with him along on the ride, but he helped me get it in. And then after Tonka took it for the U.S., we traveled all over the world. It was licensed in 52 countries around the world. It shot up to #1 in the world. Did $1 billion at retail worldwide. I had a cartoon show by Hanna-Barbera and a movie by Kuroko and TriStar Productions. And it's still sold to today, 40 years later. You can go into the stores and get them because kids still love Pound Puppies the same as they did back then. How did I get a How did I get a cartoon show? At the very start, before I'd licensed it to anybody or shown it or done anything, I took 2 handmade Pound Puppies, put them in a box, wrote a handwritten letter. I sent it to Hanna-Barbera because they were the only people I knew that made cartoon shows when I was growing up watching. I always saw Hanna-Barbera, Hanna-Barbera. So I sent 2 handmade ones in a box with a letter said, I've invented this toy. I think it'd make a great cartoon show. If you're interested, please call me. The next week, I got a call from Joe Terratero, vice president of Hanna-Barbera, said Joe Barbera loved my concept. He wanted to meet with me. After I passed out and came to, I asked him when could I come out to Hollywood to meet with him. And we went out and met with him. And when I walked in, Bill Hanna and Joe Barbera had an office where they were partner tables. They were both in one office together. Joe Barbera was holding on to the Pound Puppy. He looked at me, he says, I love this the minute I saw it. Do you know why? I don't have to explain to a child what it is, what it's about. The storylines are natural, and it translates all over the world, even where they don't have pounds. I'd love to make a cartoon show. And I says, okay. Gave him a hand. I said, here's handshake deal. You got the rights to the animation on it, but I got to go find a toy company first to sell the toy. So I went out. I got Tonka, and Hanna-Barbera put up money together to produce the cartoon show, and we ended up on ABC for 2 years. But see, the reason I make those points, people are afraid, oh, I can't write a letter to Hanna-Barbera. I can't go do all these different things. There was nothing special other than I just wouldn't give up through all the no's and all the things that I got in the process. I'm going to be 76 on September the 4th of this year. And my story is I'm not done. And the reason I'm not done is you're never done. At the age of 70, I got this insane idea that I was going to write a book. Oh, by the way, I still invent toys. I've got a toy out in Europe right now, and I got a new one in consideration at this time with the company. I've invented 20 other toys past Pound Puppies. But it's like, I ask everybody, what's Sweet Home Alabama? Do you know that song? Yeah. I said, name some other songs they've written. It was like with Pound Puppies. See, when you're number one, it's kind of hard to beat it on the second time around. But at any rate, at 70, I decided, when COVID hit, I said, you know, I've got this idea for a movie, and I was working with some people on it and stuff. COVID hit, shut Hollywood down. I said, well, I'm going to write a great synopsis of my story. 6 months later, in 169 pages, I had my synopsis done. Then I said, oh, well, I'll just turn it into a book. And I started doing that. And writing is one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. The problem is you get ideas like, oh, it would be better if we did this, but then you got to change everything in the book. So I'm 4 years before the book finally came out, and had it not been for Annette at the end helping me to get the book out, it wouldn't have made it. Even then, at that point in time, I needed the help to get the book out in the process. 3 years ago, at the age of 72, I got an idea for a country song. And I said, I don't know anything about country music, but I asked somebody in our building where we live, a guy who'd had a business in Nashville, I said, do you know any songwriters? I said, crazy question, in Nashville? He says, no, but I've got a friend that knows the best of the best. And I said, okay, so he gave me his name. I called him and I said, I need the names of some songwriters out of Nashville. He says, well, one's really famous. He's nominated for 2 Grammys. Every single person in the world singing his songs. 10 songs with Kenny Chesney, 12 songs with Tim McGraw, Carrie Underwood, you name everybody. He's been just, really tops. He said, and then I know another one. He's good, but he's not that good. I said, I want the best one. So I called him up. I'm going to make long story short for you. I got the very nicest plush, polite brush off. I said, I know nobody's ever told you that they got an idea for a country song. He's been writing them for 30 years. And it took me a year of courting and being nice and hounding him and calling back. And I said, I'm going to pay you. I've got my idea for my song. I just want you to help me turn it into a song. And after a year, I brought him down to perform for some of our friends. And he says, okay, we're going to do it. He said, we're friends now. He said, a year ago, I didn't know you. And he said, now we're friends, we can do this. Well, we wrote the song. Another thing's going to shock you. It's about a dog. It's about a PTSD guy that comes home from war, and he rescues a dog off the highway. And the song is called Who Rescued Who? And then at the end of the song, it's about who really did rescue who, the dog or him. Canine for Warriors has picked it up as their national song. Sony Records just announced this year they're picking it up, and next June at the Country Music Awards Festival in Nashville, Tennessee, it's going to be recorded and put out into the marketplace. So I want you to look at all those areas. I want you to look at all those areas. At the start, when I told you about the toys and going around and showing it and 14 rejections in the process of it, Kenner Toy Company in Cincinnati, Howard Bollinger was the guy you presented to. And I presented it to Howard twice, and he rejected it twice. I went back a second time because I was from Cincinnati. I was hoping I'd get a Cincinnati company to take it. Howard came up to me one day at Toy Fair after it's #1 in the world. We're the #1 toy being sold. And he says, Mike, do you know why you succeeded? He said, you didn't know all the reasons why it wouldn't work like we do. And so that's the point. It's the same point with the book. Now, I am officially an author. I've been rejected by 4 agents. So that makes it official in the process. And like I said, we're just getting started, but we're going to make it. We're going to make it succeed. We're going to get it out there in the process. And some of you have probably seen the book that we have out here, but it's a story about a girl and a dog, and it's serious. It's not a little kid's story. It's a serious story about a little girl that suffers tragedy in losing her parents, and a little dog 2,000 miles apart, and how they end up rescuing each other, the little girl and the dog. And so for some reason, I keep ending up with dogs and stuff. Also, I will say, I've got a really great review that I decided to put on the back of the book. It's from Steve Waterman. He's the top family movie producer of movies in Hollywood. And Steve said he loves it. It would make an absolutely great movie, the types of movies he likes to make, and he's willing to put up money to produce the movie. So that's my point for everybody here. If you can ever kick that little person off your shoulder that keeps telling you all the time why things won't work, then they will work for you. And that's exactly what happened to me with every single thing that I pursued, and I'm not done yet. Now it's open to questions. Anyway, I see a hand go up back there. Go ahead. And I'm hard. Number one, I am very hard of hearing. That's why I have hearing aids.
My son is with Canines for Warriors. He's Iraqi, Afghanistan veteran with PTSD, and he has a service dog. What is the name of the song, and who sings it?
Who Rescued Who? And it's going to be Ryan Larkins is the guy singing it. He's a new upcoming singing star with Sony Records.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great program. It's a great program. My son's picture is in here in Eisenhower. When you first walk in, he's the first colored picture on the left.
Ah.
He has bronze medal there. He's with a group of Iraqi police department, a sheik, and so it's a pretty interesting picture. And a lot of times people come through here, they don't know who's affiliated with who. They're just pictures on the wall. That's my son.
You know, I was never in the military, and so I have this deep respect and feeling of wanting to help. And I'm involved with the Navy SEAL Foundation and with the Canine for Warriors, and a major portion of whatever money would ever be made out of this song goes directly back to the Canine for Warriors in the process. Yes?
How did you get a review for your first book from a
I'm sorry.
How did you get stars on reviews?
How did you get Steve Waterman to give you a review? How did you get Steve Waterman to give you a review?
Steve Waterman was somebody that I knew through. Oh, I'm sorry. I knew Steve Waterman from years ago in Hollywood and stuff, and he called me up and told me, he says, "Hey, I read your book," and he said it's awesome, and so that's how the thing came up with it. Any other questions? Yes.
You live in the villages now?
No, I live on Amelia Island. I moved to Amelia Island in 1993 from Cincinnati, Ohio, and I met my beautiful wife there, Charlotte, and we waited till she got her teenage son out of high school, and then we got married. and he went away to chef school in May, and we got married in June. But he's a great guy, great kid. Yeah. See, there's the air on back here.
I came in and listened to you. I love the story, and especially about on his shoulder. Because I know a lot of times, even with me when I was in corporate business in Manhattan, I was always, I'm not good enough to do that. I'm not this, and it was always there's a good here and there's a bad here, and they're like boxing with each other. You can do it, you can't do it. You can do it, you can't do it. And I was very lucky that I did succeed with that. But everything that you're saying could apply to anything. Not even just writing it. It could apply to anything in your life. So thank you for your story. Good luck.
You're 100% correct on that. I went through high school and I tried out for baseball, I got cut. I tried out for basketball, I got cut. I tried out for football, I got cut. And so I was like really down in the dumps. I can't do any of the, and you know how sports heroes are in high school. If you're not, you're a notch down below there. And then a friend of mine moved into my high school in my senior year, and he had been the Pennsylvania high school state lightweight wrestling championship. And he says, "Come on, you ought to go out for wrestling." I says, "I can't do wrestling." I said, "I got cut out of everything." He said, "No, you got cut out of team sports. Wrestling is one person against another person. It's up to you whether or not you win at that, and there's no other different team members that affect whether or not you win." I went out for it, and in the first year, I ended up, my senior year, I went to state with him, got beat in my very first match, but I got there in the process of it, okay, in the thing. And yes, it is, it does apply to anything and everything. As I've been giving speeches since Pound Puppies started to people, different groups, and through the years, as I've gotten older, the messages that I try to deliver, basically success is the bottom one, but I've had different themes for that. Now I'm not done because I'm going to be 76. And I went through one once, and I want to try it with you guys here. How many of you in here have ever had an idea for anything? I don't care if it was to make a little glass better or this or that. How many of you have ever had an idea in your lifetime of something you think would make it better? Raise your hands. How many of you have created it? 1, 2, 3. My point was that when I would talk to people and I'd say, you've got to take the extra step and do it in the process. I called that the greatest ideas on earth will never be invented. And I remember the first time I gave that talk at a room full of people, all the hands went up, all the hands went down. And after it was over with, this woman walked up to me and she goes, "You can't say that." And I said, "Say what?" She said, "The greatest ideas on earth will never be invented." "You don't know if it's the greatest idea on earth." And I said, "You're right. We never will know, will we?" So, like I said, I change as I go through the years. But my goal is to inspire people to chase and follow their dreams. I'm getting ready to start a podcast. It's all directed at motivational for people out there. And you know what? If I influence one person to pursue their dream, it could change the whole world. You look at what's happened with computers and phones and different types of things that are out there. One thing can change the whole world. And that's why it's critical. I beat cancer 13 years ago. I had appendix cancer, and I was determined to beat that, and it's only 35%, make it 5 years, and I'm 13 years out. And it's attitude, and I've got bladder cancer right now, and I'm going to beat that. I'm only a couple months away from finishing my chemo on that, and everything's going good, and I'm going to beat that. I'm not worried about it. And it's got attitude. I go in for my chemo treatment, and the two nurses last time I was in there, they said, "You're the happiest guy we have coming in here to get chemo," and laughing and cutting up all the time. And I said, "Yeah," I said, "I'm glad you guys got that stuff to help me in the process." And she said, "If we could just bottle that and give it to the rest of our patients," she said, "that would be a huge difference in the ones that succeed here." So remember that. Okay? You're here, and you're not done yet. None of you. One final thing, I cannot ignore this. I have family that lives in Orlando, and they surprised me, and they came over here to listen. I have 2 grandsons over here. Stand up. My son-in-law and his wife and their friends. Over there. Diana and Renee. I'm getting good at remembering names. Yeah. So thank you. I appreciate your time.